guys, this is Robert. Again, thank you for watching this short series of videos. This will be the final series on what we're covering, which is the basic operation of your camera. In our first video, we talked about aperture and how that helps us control the amount of light that comes in the camera and determines our depth of field, how much of our images is in focus. In our second video, we talked about shutter speed, which also controls how much light comes into our camera, but also controls the clarity of the stop action of our image, or if you want it blurry. Third video, we talked about ISO, or film speed, and how that affects the overall clarity as far as grain or noise of our image and how sensitive those settings are to our light that we're shooting in. So we have, those are the three things: ISO, film speed, then we have shutter speed, and then we have the aperture or f-stop that control our lighting. How do we use those together to create a properly exposed image? I've used this analogy quite a few times. Let's pretend, and I should have one, let's pretend that we have a balloon here. And this balloon that's inflated and tied up represents the proper exposure we need for our image. The proper amount of light, everything that we want is in this balloon. So let's just talk about aperture and shutter speed. Let's say that we have the exact aperture that we want to create the look that we want in our image. Well, if we're holding this balloon, and if we narrow down our aperture, so we squeeze our balloon, and again, the balloon represents the proper amount of light that we need. If we narrow this end down, what happens to this end of our balloon? It gets larger. That air has to go somewhere. It's the same thing with our light and our exposure. If we take our aperture and we narrow that down, then we have to increase our shutter speed. Or if we narrow down and squeeze this into the balloon, we narrow down our shutter speed, then what happens to our balloon? It increases on this side. So if we speed up our shutter speed, then we have to open up our aperture. That exposure has got to be somewhere. So you have to find the happy medium that it takes to create the image that you want. Most cameras now, and even back in film they did this, they had priority modes. Canon, Nikon, they call them a little bit different things, but they're the same exact result. Sony does it, Pentax did it, Minolta did it, Panasonic does it, they all do it. They have priority modes. So if, for instance, it's not quite manually controlled, but if you go to an aperture priority mode, it allows you to set what aperture that you want. So if the aperture is the most important thing that you need to control in your image, you can go to aperture priority mode, set your aperture, and it will fill the rest of the balloon up for you. It will adjust the shutter speed that you need to create the image that you want. If you make the adjustments that you need and it makes the shutter speed corrections and it's still not bright enough or it's not dark enough, that's when you have to adjust your ISO. If everything that you do to create the image that you want, if you've done those things and there's still not enough light or there's too much light, that's when you adjust your ISO or your film speed. It's kind of a last resort. Okay. Typically you will have your film speed at your lowest possible number, for instance 100. If there's any way that you can create the image that you want using your adjustments for your aperture and your shutter speed, then that's what you do. If you've made every adjustment you can make and you still don't have enough light or have too much light, that's when you need to make your adjustments to your ISO. Those things, three things, work together. If you're out shooting a sports event, then your aperture is not your most important thing. The most important thing may be your shutter speed, so that you're stopping the action. So it's not a matter of who cares how much in front is in focus or behind your image is in focus. The point is, the thing that you're shooting needs to be stopped and clear. So in that case, it will be your shutter speed that's the priority. You set that to stop the speed that you need to. Adjust your aperture accordingly so that you get enough or the proper amount of light. And again, if those two things still don't create the proper amount of light together that you need, then you adjust your ISO, your film speed, so that gives you more latitude, either lighter or darker. It's just a balancing act. When you take from one, you have to give to the other. If those two things don't work together, then you have to adjust your film speed up or down to create the look that you want. So the basic idea is you have your shutter speed, you have your balloon with all your proper information, and you have your shutter speed and you have your aperture, and in the middle is your ISO. You determine what's the most important thing in your picture. You set that first. If you want to blur everything out in the background first and foremost, then it's your aperture that's your most important thing. You set your aperture. Then you adjust the other end of that balloon, which is your shutter speed, so that you try to get the right amount of light in there. If all that doesn't work and you still need more light, then you adjust your ISO. Or if you need less light, you adjust your ISO. There's a lot to take in. Practice, practice, practice. To go outside, play with the different modes on your camera. Do your aperture priority mode, do your shutter speed priority mode. Then jump on into manual. It's not that scary. That big M is not that scary. Put it on manual. Adjust things, take pictures. If you've got a digital camera, you have no excuse in the world. Film is cheap. It's non-existent in a digital camera. Go out and play, go out and shoot, and learn what your camera can do and how you can control that camera to create the image or the video that you want to create with the look that you want it to have. Thanks for watching.